Hey, Daniel from GrowYourMusicStudio.com. In this video, I legit want to talk about how to solve almost all of your studio's problems, being 100% serious. And because this is a topic that I've been thinking about, I actually want to invite some feedback from people who are watching this video. These thoughts have been circling in my head because of some conversations I've had with clients, conversations that I have been involved with on Facebook, or people who read my blog. I've even observed some conversations between two other people on Facebook groups in like Piano Teacher Central and places like that. And I've just had this thought that's been developing over time, and it kind of came to a head this week with a couple conversations I had with a few other teachers I know. And it's this, that I don't think there's a problem that can be solved, or I don't think there's a problem that exists inside of someone's studio that can't be solved by marketing, if you look at it from a certain point of view. Another thought too, I know I've referenced this in past videos, I might be plagiarizing myself a little bit here, because I've referenced this here and there, but this is just at the forefront of my mind. So, I want to start out just by saying this. Want to cut in and say, I'm actually really interested in getting your feedback. So there's a few points in this video that I'm going to actually ask you to write a comment or two. If you're on your phone, I would greatly appreciate if you take the time to type that out with your thumbs. I know it gets annoying, but I really do want feedback from people because this thought has, like I said, been really in my thoughts. So this is it. Here's just a small list of problems that I have solved personally in my studio because of marketing. Rate change problems or low rate problems. Students that don't practice, problem students, problem parents, students with behavioral issues, late payments, programming issues. And when I say programming issues, I mean like I wanted to move to group lessons. I was currently doing a private lesson model, but I wanted to move to group lessons, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that. Okay, that is just a list, a small list of problems in my studio that I've solved using marketing. Now here's one of the first places I'd really like to hear from people who are watching. Of that list of things I said, I'm sure some of those you resonate with. Maybe there's something in there that maybe I didn't say that you're thinking, oh, this is a problem I have in my studio right now, or a problem that I dealt with in the recent past, but I've solved. Would just love to hear that, because I'm wondering if there actually is any problem that can't be solved by marketing. Okay, so having said that, like I said, this is going to be a little bit more of a conversational video. A lot of times I just get on here and rant for 15 minutes. This time I am looking for some feedback here, and if not live, which I'm doing this video live, I'm going to upload it later to YouTube. If not live, if you leave a comment below, I'm definitely going to come back and have a conversation with you, or would just appreciate your perspective. So here's what I mean by all these problems can be solved by marketing. Because you might think, how do you solve students that don't practice by marketing better? How is that a problem? Well, this is it. And this is the crux of the situation. Basically, any area in your studio where you're in a hostage situation because of money, parents are very aware of this. They're exquisitely aware of places where they kind of have you in a bind financially speaking. And they might not know the exact financial details of your studio, but there is a anxiety that carries through. I think when a teacher or a studio owner, a school owner, has financial interest in keeping students in the studio. By the way, for very large schools, this could also be true of staff, whether it's admin staff, whether it's teaching staff. If you're in a hostage situation around money, or if a certain teacher quits, and because you've loaded them up with 40 students, and they quit, and all of a sudden 40 students are without a teacher, and that teacher knows that you're going to be in a bind, that subtly gives them power over you. In the same way that parents might subtly detect from you, because of signals you give, that they're in control of the studio, that you're not in charge, the customers are in charge. It's that famous phrase, the inmates have taken over the asylum. Okay, so any place where you're in a hostage situation because of money, this is a place where you could potentially solve problems by marketing. And this is very simple. In fact, so simple I considered not making this video. I thought maybe this is too obvious. But like I mentioned at the outset of this video, I've seen enough conversations, I've had enough conversations personally as of late to think that maybe this is a concept that I should talk about a little bit and invite some feedback on, because I'd like to develop my thinking here. So if you have 50 students in your studio, or 200 students in your studio, all right, let's just go with like the 200 number. You can scale it down to 20 if you want. But if you have 200 students in your studio, and you lose 30 students a year, then as long as you're advertising or marketing enough to replace those 30 students, you are going to maintain that enrollment, okay? Now, what happens then if you double the number of people? What if instead of advertising or marketing enough each year, or having marketing that's of such high quality, maybe you don't have to spend a lot of money, maybe your marketing is so high quality or so good that you get 60 students a year. So you either spend enough to get 60 new students a year, or your marketing is good enough that you just draw people in really powerfully. What happens then? Well, then you can actually begin to pick and choose the students you work with. Of course. Okay, so this is very obvious up to this point. This is the point at which I think the insight comes. Because obviously we can all do math. If you're watching this, I know you know how to count. So I realized that practice problems, staff problems, problems with parents, I realized that these can be solved in other ways. The popular conception is that, maybe there's a technique, maybe there's a method that I can use to get students to practice more. Maybe if I know how to say the right thing, or I had the right script, that I could get these parents to fall in line and do what I ask them to do. They'll actually follow the studio policies. Well, here's what I say. And the pattern that I've taken in my career, and these are the stories that I mentioned early on, that I actually want to tell you a few stories of how this worked for me. Whether or not you do those things, there is a power dynamic at play here, a triangle, if you will, where you have a relationship with your studio's finances, and you have a relationship with your studio parents. It's inappropriate and actually detrimental to your business if you're incredibly dependent on those parents. I referenced this in a video last week or 2 weeks ago, but I want to take it one step further here, because you're kind of getting my thinking in real time. Like, this is kind of what's been on my mind as of late. It's great to solve these problems. The practice problem, problems with parents, late tuition, staff problems. It's great to solve that by actually working on techniques. But if underneath that the power dynamic doesn't change and there's an anxiety there on your part, then it doesn't matter how many techniques you bring to the party. That problem is still going to be a problem for you. And so what I subtly suggest is that you take control of the power dynamic by becoming really great at marketing first, so that you have the option to fire any problem in your studio. All right? And that's really the insight for the video. I solved most of my studio's problems by being able to fire them. But the only reason I could do that was because I had the marketing to back it up. There were times that within a 12-week period, I attracted 40, 50 leads for my studio because I upped my studio budget. Even over, and I think I mentioned this last week, but even over the November 1st to December 31st period at the end of 2017, I shut my ads off during that period and still got around 35 requests for lessons during that period of time. I don't know the exact number, but it was right around 35. And what I'm saying is that if you have the control, if you have the power to predict what your marketing results can be, if you have the budget to do that, if you have the creative, if you have the copy to back all that up, then any problem that you currently don't like that you have in your studio, you can fire that problem, whether it's a person or a situation, and you can move to something else. Okay, so a couple examples of how that has worked for me, how that dynamic has played for me. At a certain point, there was a type of student, a demographic of student that I really wanted to work with, and I didn't really care to work with other students, but continued to do it because I needed the money. This was early on in my career. So I worked with anyone who came to me, preschoolers, adults, teenagers, beginners, transfer students, obviously new students, new beginners. And over time, as my marketing got better, I began firing other kinds of students. Now, that didn't mean necessarily literally. Sometimes I just let attrition naturally take its course. So the first thing that went for me was adult students. I just didn't want to work with adult students anymore. And so what I did was, increased my marketing results. And then as adult students left, I just didn't replace them. And to this day, I would say probably 15% of the requests I get for lessons are from adult students, and I just send them to other teachers in my area. That's just what I do. The next to go were preschoolers. I decided I didn't want to work with preschoolers anymore, even though there's a lot of great preschool methods out there. It seems like there's more and more every week. It seems like everyone's throwing their hat in the ring with preschool programs these days. But despite that, I don't want to work with them. I just don't. It doesn't fit in the philosophy and the vision I have for my own studio. So again, I let attrition happen, and I only replace students, preschool students that were leaving, with students that were within the demographic that I primarily want to serve, which is 6 to 12-year-olds. And of course, I work with teens, but a lot of times I don't too often start teens as beginners. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay. In 2012, when I had my son, I fired all my traveling students. And I actually did it again. Last year, I started a traveling studio just as a fun experiment. I documented a little bit by video. I documented a little bit on my blog. It worked well for the time. I wanted to kind of experiment with it. In the back of my mind during that whole time, I thought, when this is all done, I might just give the students to the teachers that I hired. And that's exactly what I did. As of January, all the students that I attracted over those 6 months, I just straight up gave them to those teachers. It was a fun experiment. I wanted to see what having a traveling studio was like. I mostly did it just to kind of have a greater insight into what some of my clients were dealing with, to be quite honest. And so I'm now getting requests for traveling lessons, and I'm just passing those off to the teachers that I've been previously working with. So this is what I'm talking about. I would not be able to do this if the marketing wasn't strong. I wouldn't be able to do this if that strength wasn't there. And so when I say you can solve any problem in your studio with marketing, it's just that if you have the power to attract any student you want at any time you want, and you can predict it, you have a system built that allows you to do that, then you can fire a situation that you don't like. If you have enough students to be making the income you want or the margin that you want, you can solve non-personnel problems as well. And here's what I mean. If you need more time, maybe you need to outsource admin to a third party. Maybe you need to outsource HR. Maybe you need to outsource your marketing. If you have the money coming in, you can solve time problems. You can solve focus problems, energy problems, things that you just don't like doing. You can fire those problems, outsource them to someone else. So this is the thought. Now, kind of going to end with this. Is this helpful? Were these ideas helpful to you? My concern was maybe this was a little obvious. So I'd love in the comments if you just kind of wrote that. Next thing, if you didn't know this, or if you did know this and you were kind of already aware of this thought or you already practiced this, are you actually doing it? Have you experienced difficulty, firing problems? Have you experienced difficulty getting your marketing to the point where you kind of have that luxury where you basically have all the power in the studio as opposed to parents or staff, or you feel like you're a slave of your calendar, or you're at the mercy of whether or not the phone rings or not. So would really love in the comments below, whether you're watching this on YouTube, whether you're watching this on Facebook, would love to know kind of your experiences there. Would love to get your feedback. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up, share it if it was helpful. And have a great weekend. I'll see you next week with a few live videos. Already have a few planned, kicking some things around in my mind. And I'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Bye.